Hello everyone and welcome to my tournament report for Orlando Regionals. Now, as you can see on your screen, I wanted to start off with the list immediately because I'm sure that's what most of you are here for. I used Greninja BREAK at Orlando Regionals. We had over 600 Masters players. That's the biggest regional tournament in history so far. And this is the list that I ended up using. Huge props to my teammates Mike Fouché and Sam Chen, especially Mike for helping me test out the list, and between the both of us we really perfected the list, I will say. Up to this point I would make changes after the tournament for sure, but this is the card for card we played. Sam ended up doing the best out of all of us. He got 11th place. Then I got 56th place for 24 championship points, and Mikey I think ended up with a 5-4 record. Basically there was so much variety and so much Carpador that it was definitely not the best meta call, but it was the tournament, it was the deck that I was the most comfortable with. So I'd like you to direct your attention to the Pokemon aspect of the list. As you can see, we are running a 4-4-3 Greninja BREAK line. This is different from my Nationals report or my National winning deck, where I used a 4-4-2 Greninja BREAK line. The third break has definitely been really good. It helps you with pricing issues, it helps you with consistency. You get out 2 Greninja BREAKs more often than not. But I will say that with such a Garbodor heavy metagame, the ability doesn't really end up mattering too much. Any game you actually get access to the ability, you will probably win anyways, but in the Garbodor matchups you actually rely on other methods of putting extra damage counters into play, and the Greninja BREAK ends up being mostly for the extra 40 HP, which definitely comes in handy, but it's not absolutely crucial. And then I know the Talonflame version of Greninja is definitely the way more popular one, especially after it got 2nd place and top 4 at Worlds, but I still don't like Talonflame. I've tried the Talonflame version extensively. I will concede that it was probably a better play for Worlds, if you will, but the most important thing that I think I learned from the Worlds list is that Bertimaloon is an absolutely incredible card in this deck, but we'll get to that in a little bit. I'm running the 1-1 Remoraid Octillery with 1 Jirachi. Now, I can't tell you how valuable and how important Jirachi was in all of my wins at Orlando. It was absolutely crucial. It helped me win against Mega Rayquazas, it helped me win against Mega Mewtwo's, it gave me a chance against Darkrai Giratina. Jirachi was close to the MVP of the tournament, and if you remember from Nationals, I was running a 2-1 Remoraid Octillery line and 2 Jirachi, so I am running 2 less basic Pokemon, which in the statistics, if you will, doesn't really make a big difference, but in the tournament itself, I think having 2 less basic Pokemon was one of the factors that I could attribute my losses to, but we'll get to that for in the rounds. Then for energy, I ran 7 water energy and 2 splash. Now, splash energy I also regret not running in my worlds list. The splash energy is absolutely incredible. It puts less pressure on you finding the super odds early on. If you can find a splash energy in the early game and recover the Frogadier that will get KO'd, that got the water duplicates off, that is such an impactful thing in the game, especially if you prize 1 Frogadier, which is a very common occurrence. Still having access to 3 Greninjas, even after you prize Frogadier, is absolutely huge, and not having to rely on the super odds so much is really good, especially since we lost the Sacred Ash and we can't have that extra recovery, if you will. So yeah, I think that energy split was ideal for the tournament. There was one round where not having an extra basic energy instead of the splash ended up mattering and probably causing me to lose, but it was 1 out of a potential 27 games, so I think you're very okay in running this split. Now, as far as supporters go, this is one of the most consistent lines I think you can run in this deck. For Sycamore and for N, they are the best supporters, the best draw supporters out there. And 1 teammates and 1 Ace Trainer, because this deck gets their Pokemon KO'd really easily, and teammates allows you to recover from that, find those bursting balloons, which are very important, and you also get to punish your opponent for taking early prizes with Ace Trainer. So both of those are really good cards. Lysander and Fisherman are obviously staple. The expanded regionals winning list ended up not even running Lysander, and even though I can see why, the Lysander was probably the reason why I had a chance in many of the games, and the reason I was able to pull off a lot of the wins as well. So I would definitely keep at least 1 Lysander, but I would love to find room for more. Now, my item cards were 4 Berserker and 4 Dive Ball, once again for consistency purposes, 4 Bursting Balloon because they are one of the most important cards for this deck, and one of the best cards overall in the format, I would say, because there's no tool removal at this point. And then we have 2 Level Ball, 2 Super Rod, and 1 Ultra Ball. Now, the ball count is almost identical to my Nationals list. The only thing is the Level Ball and Ultra Ball counts are reversed, but I'm not gonna say that made an impact in my tournament run, but I would definitely consider making a change to those, as in increasing the count, in order for future tournaments. And I will talk about the improvements I would make to the list, which are very slight or very small, but I think would increase the consistency of the deck. And in a non-Garbodor dominated metagame, which unfortunately is not the one we currently live in, I think this deck could really excel, and is probably, like, this deck is the number 1 reason why Garbodor is popular. If this deck wasn't available in the metagame, I don't think Garbodor would have such an impact in the metagame. And then I'm gonna finish the list with the 4 Faded Town. Faded Town, once again, is one of the tools that, because the mega decks tend to run Garbodor, Faded Town and Burst Balloon gives you a chance to keep putting indirect damage through those 2 cards on your opponent's Pokemon, so that you can achieve 2-hit KOs consistently. And get that really nice 2-for-1 trade-off of your non-EXs for their EXs. So yeah, that's the list I ran. Once again, huge props to my teammates Sam Chen and Mike Fouché, especially Mike. And yeah, that was the result of our extensive testing. This is what I ran. And now let's start going into the tournament review. Okay, first I'll show you guys the PTC Geo Print screen of the list. I guess it might help some of you guys to visualize the list better. It will also be listed in the description down below, so for easier access for you guys if you want to import it directly to the Pokemon Training Card Game Online and test it out. And yeah, I mean, it's the exact same list, simply with the card images instead of the text. So moving on to the tournament. Round 1, I faced off against Volcanion EX, which was definitely one of the most popular decks in the whole tournament. I was not surprised by that. It's an easily accessible deck, it's not too expensive, as long as you already have the Shamans or whatever. The Volcanions are not too expensive, and it has high damage output, high HP basic Pokemon, and a lot of ways to recover energy, to move energy around. It can run different techs, can abuse tool cards. So Volcanion, definitely a very good choice for the tournament, maybe. A very popular one for sure. And I got to face one round 1, and I will not say these games were easy, but both decks were able to set up on game 1, and I pulled off an arrow win there. The Shadow Stitching threat is very real, and that, when paired with N, makes it really hard for the Volcanion players to find the Ranger in order to try and get 1-hit KOs back. And if they don't, they are sometimes 3-hit KOing Greninja, so that's really bad for them. And even though you are only 2-hit KOing them, potentially, or maybe even 3-hit KOing them, eventually you will get to the Greninja break in order to be able to use Giant Water Shuriken. And with the advantage of the indirect damage, along with the Bursting Balloons as well, you can definitely win the price trade-off against Baby Volcanion, and Volcanion EX is definitely nowhere near an issue. As long as you target smartly their energy placements and things like that, I believe this matchup should be a very easy win, and the only reason they might get wins off of you is the fact that your setup is very shaky and theirs is very consistent and very reliable. But as long as you survive the early game, this should be a very easy win. And second game, my opponent's deck bricked, and I was able to take advantage of that and won very comfortably 2-0. So that was a really nice way to start off the day. Sorry, I'm gonna take a sip of water. And then round 2, I faced off against Robert Bednar with a Mega Mewtwo Carpador deck. Now, obviously Carpador is an issue, but as you saw in the deck list description, I do have 4 Faded Town and I do have 4 Bursting Balloon to try and combat that. And the fact that Greninja Break has so much HP means that if you are able to reach the Greninja Break stage, Mega Mewtwo's need 6 energy in order to 1-hit KO you. Damage change is definitely very annoying, so the Stadium War is very important, and the Stadium War ended up being the crucial factor in our matches. I won 2-0, I believe, this round. I'm not exactly sure, like it's a blur between games 1 and 2, but there was definitely a game where my opponent played down his stadium first, a parallel city, and then at some point I wasn't able to find Faded Town and early on, but he wasn't putting too much pressure either, and there came a point where I had enough damage on Mega Mewtwo to threaten him, so he was forced into playing his second stadium, Shrine of Memories, in order to damage change. And so he damage changed, but that was 2 stadiums down for him. And then I believe in that same turn where he did the Shrine of Memories play, he actually had to Sycamore, and in the Sycamore discard I saw he discarded a 3rd stadium, a 2nd parallel city, so in order to find the psychic energy for the damage change. So I had yet to play a single stadium and he had already gotten rid of 3. So even though I was down in prices, through ends and when I eventually found the Faded Town, I was able to come back, and because he had tried to set up early on and he had he had 3 Mega Mewtwo's in play at one point, but only 1 or 2 were powered up. So eventually he was never able to replace the Faded Town, and through Faded Town, between turns, I was actually able to get a KO on Mega Mewtwo and allowed me to focus on the other 2 Mega Mewtwo's. So that was really good. And 100% Bursting Balloon and Faded Town, and having access to teammates in order to guarantee those cards continually was definitely key in order to win this match. I would say the matchup is 50-50. I think if the Mega Mewtwo player knows the matchup and plays correctly, like I would argue Mega Evolving is a mistake in this matchup sometimes. So as long as you play smartly and are able to get Carpador out, Mega Mewtwo should be kind of favored. But because there's so many reasons that the Mega Mewtwo can make mistakes or whatever, maybe it's even, but in trying to be 100% objective, I do not like this matchup for Greninja. So we were up 2-0 at this point, and I will put a description or a box or a link in the description down below, because round 3 was my first ever streamed match. I was very excited about that. I was also kind of nervous, and I mean, I generally think it's worth it. It's the games went to game 3, okay, and that's all the spoiler I'm gonna give. If you don't want any more spoilers, check out the streamed match before you continue watching this video and this report. Once again, the link will be in the description down below, or in case I forget, it's in the Team Fish Knuckles YouTube channel. In the comment section of that video, I actually put the timestamp so that you can see my game. And yeah, it was against Mega Rayquaza, and I'll go through the games really quickly. Game 1, I was not able to find a basic Pokemon. He went first, he set up, I drew past, and then he got a KO on my single Froakie, and I was not able to do anything. Game 2, I of course opted to go first, and I got a Froakie, I played an N, and I was not able to find a second basic Pokemon. And in Ryan's turn, he almost got the dunk, I believe, and after he almost got the dunk and passed it to me, I was able to top deck, I believe, a basic Pokemon. I was able to set up, and I pulled off a really clean win, I would say, between Jirachi smart turns, between Faded Town, between abilities, etc. I was able to pull off a clean win. Now, it's important to say that Ryan, I did see a Tianci X get discarded at some point. I also saw Fairy Energy, but I never saw... he never attacked with anything besides Mega Rayquaza. And then game 3, I almost got dunked once again. No, I am lying, that was game 2. Game 3 I actually started 3 basic Pokemon, so that was quite a relief, and I actually got a decent hand. Eventually, because of different circumstances, I was down 6-2 in prices at one point, but I was able to make a comeback. And like I said, guys, you guys should seriously watch the game if you want to see me play. I received a lot of positive comments after the match, like people saying, wow, this Tablemon dude is really legit. People were saying, you earned my sub after I saw you play. Like, I know I make a lot of mistakes in the videos, but it's also very hard. Like, just consider, I'm trying to express everything I'm thinking about during a game. English is of course not my first language, as you know. I am very good. I did learn English since I was 6-7 years old, and I do consider it almost native, but it's definitely not my native language. And between trying to explain myself, between doing it in a different language and trying to concentrate on the game, I would say the videos do not 100% reflect my skill level, but if I'm in the zone, I'm in the tournament, I'm concentrated, I'm focused on what's going on. I rarely, I mean, I do make mistakes, but I feel like my level of play is definitely a bit higher in my tournaments than in the videos, for sure. So yeah, that was round 3. I managed to make a 6-hit comeback. Definitely check it out, and let's move on to round number 4. Now, round number 4 was against Brit Pibas, who got top 16 at Worlds. He also got, I believe, top 16 at this regional. And when I saw his name on the sheet, I definitely got nervous because I mean, I've never really talked too much with Brit. I know who he is, he knows who I am. I know he's a really good player, so I was definitely kind of nervous. And I know I have the potential to beat anybody, but I definitely was very nervous because I invested a ton of money going to Orlando. This was the first, I don't know, big name player that I was playing, and I definitely wanted to do a good showing at this tournament. So after he flipped over the Gardevoir, I was actually kind of nervous because the other Mega Gardevoir, the one that's not dual type, I believe is a harder matchup for Greninja. But after he went first and he started setting up Hoopas and Shaymins and attaching energy and things like that, and I realized his list did not contain any of the other Mega Gardevoir. It was the novelty version with a 4 Shaymin line, 3 Hoopa, which I will be covering on Monday as well, so you can definitely look forward to that on the channel. But yeah, he was playing that, and I realized that he was not playing Garbodor. So between Faded Town, between Giant Water Shuriken, between him needing a Stadium and a discard of 6 Pokemon in order to one-hit kill Greninja Break, and my Bursting Balloons, all of those factors ended up making it so that I set up both games. I was able to survive the early game, and I believe I got a pretty clean win. Using Shadow Stitching towards the end is also very key because you deny Hoopa in order for them to recover basic Pokemon. You deny their draw, and I mean their main issue with the draw is finding stadiums to counteract your Faded Town. So if you can deny that, you're really good there. And yeah, the constant end pressure plus the Giant Water Shurikens plus the high HP, I definitely think that deck has a very bad Greninja Break matchup. Now I do know Sam Chen, the guy who got 11th, I believe he lost against Brit on Sunday, so it'd be interesting to know his point of view. But I definitely felt very comfortable in the matchup, and not because he bricked or I bricked, simply because it generally felt that with the current list, with the current Greninja list, and all the options you have, and the fact that it's a mega deck that doesn't deny you abilities, it should be a very favorable matchup. So yeah, I was up 4-0 at that point. I was feeling really confident, and especially after beating such a good player as Brit, and I was looking forward to the rest of the tournament. Then on round 5 I faced off against an old friend, Christian Ortiz. He flipped over a Volcanion EX first, and I thought maybe Volcanion, but then he searched for other Pokemon and Isocernias and Joltix, so I realized it was a Rainbow Road deck. His start was definitely really bad. In game 1 I was able to get a really okay setup, or between okay and good setup on game 1, and I was able to clean up his table, especially after his Volcanion EX. I think Volcanion EX was stock active for like 3 or 4 turns at least, so that gave me a ton of time to set up my Greninjas and things like that, and be able to use Giant Water Shuriken, along with getting the 2 prizes off of the Volcanion. So I won game 1, I was feeling very comfortable, and then this was the turning point of the tournament. Game 2, the Mega Rayquaza thing happened. I drew a single Pokemon, he went first. During my turn, I was not able to find a second basic Pokemon, and he KO'd me turn 2, and he won that way. So giving up games, like giving up your game 1 win advantage over not finding a second basic Pokemon, is really bad. And all of this will culminate in the changes I made to a list, or I would make to a list if I were to play the Greninja Break at another event anytime soon. Yeah, that was really bad. And I mean, I still felt comfortable after how game 1 went, and the fact that I was gonna go first on the 3rd game. And I did go first, and I did set up, and he got a much better setup than he did in game 1. And eventually there came a point where I used a Super Rod to put back 3 energy in my deck, okay? In an ideal, and I was going to end Christian. I was down something like 3 to 5 in prices, maybe 2 to 5, but basically probably 3 to 5. Basically what I needed was to guarantee, or to get an energy to retreat my active Jirachi, which he had Lysander, to buy some time, or to buy a turn. I needed to hit one water energy to retreat that Jirachi and get a KO with Greninja Break, which was threatened by the Galvantula. But I only needed 1 energy, but then best case scenario I would have drawn 2 energy to be able to Giant Water Shuriken as well. But turns out I did draw an energy, and it was the Splash. So I was not able to retreat the Jirachi. He got another attack off with Galvantula, and he got 2 prizes off of that attack. So that was absolutely huge, and that was a turning point in game 3, and I was not able to win after that. So that was my first loss of the tournament. I was definitely very upset at that, especially because, I don't know, my deck was thin. I had used the Super Rod. I needed 1 energy to stay in the game, because that would have saved my Greninja Break from getting KO'd. He would have gotten 1 prize off of that attack instead of 2, and towards the end that extra prize would have definitely made a huge difference. So that was my first loss. And then round 6 I was up against Derek Perez, who told me it was his first ever tournament, I believe, or his second, something like that, and he flipped over Darkrai. So Darkrai Giratina is definitely one of the worst matchups for Greninja if it has Garbodor. But as the game progressed, I realized he did not have Garbodor. So game 1 I won very comfortably between my abilities, between denying his energy with Jirachi, between setting up. Like, Greninja just completely dominates any deck that doesn't have a Garbodor line or a way to stop its abilities. But then, game 2, guess what happened, guys? I'll give you 5 seconds to guess. Yep, he went first. I started Froakie. I was not able to find a second basic Pokemon during my turn, and he KO'd me on turn 2. And then, guess what happened? Game 3. I started Froakie. I was not able to find a second basic Pokemon, and he was able to find a Floatstone and double max elixir onto a Darkrai for the KO on his first turn of the game. So after realizing this was a really good matchup for me because he did not have Garbodor, and winning game 1 very comfortably, like having that happen twice in a row was really devastating, like for my spirits, for my prospects. I don't know, that was really, really devastating for me. And I was very, very upset at that point. Probably very visibly upset. Because my opponent even apologized for getting the turn 1 win, and you really shouldn't apologize for that. Like, yes, I was upset, but that happens, and I only have myself to blame because, I mean, it is bad luck, if you will, but I was running a very, very thin deck in terms of I was trying to maximize my resources, maximize my viability against many other decks, and now that I'm like with a cooler mind, with a new perspective, if you will, or trying to analyze the tournament and how my wins and losses went, I would say that I cut too many corners, or tried to cut too many corners in my list in order to put other useful cards, and I sacrificed the early game. I 100% made my early game a lot more difficult. Sure, I put more energy, which increased the odds of turn 2 water duplicates, but in doing so, I ended up sacrificing a basic Pokemon. Sure, I had 3 Greninja Break for the late game, but in doing so, I had less resources in the early game. So it doesn't matter if you have a really good late game if you can't get there. And that's definitely something that I have myself to blame and no one else. So that was my second loss of the day. And round 7, I was up against Mike Newey with an Yveltal Garbodor deck. Now, I cannot express how incredible this guy is. He showed so much sportsmanship in our match that it's something I will never forget. And it's kind of like when someone does something nice for you and they don't expect something back and they just tell you to pass it forward. I promise him, and I promise you guys on the channel, that I will not forget what he did. I will not comment on what he did because that's not important. All you need to know is that he's an incredible sport. If you run into him at a tournament, definitely tell him that I admire him. I admire what he did because he's great. And okay, I'll get to the games now. Game 1, I won, not comfortably. It was a really scrappy game, and it required me to pull off all my bursting balloons, all my attacks, all my Greninjas. It was definitely a very, very, very close game. And then game 2, guess what happened, guys? I was not able to find a basic Pokemon. And then we went on to game 3. And so game 3 played out just like game 1. It was a really, really scrappy game. Came down to the absolute last prize, absolute last Greninja, absolute last Yveltal EX. And I was able to pull off a very, 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 very narrow win. I cannot explain how narrow that win was. But anyways, amazing dude, really amazing dude. And I don't know, I'll always be grateful for what he did, and for, like, it's hard to encounter generally good people, I believe, these days. In society in general, not only in Pokemon, in society in general, and Mike New is definitely a generally good guy. So, after all that sappiness, we move on to round 8 against Steven Bates. Guess what happens game 1? I brick, I have no other basic Pokemon, and he KOs me. And guess what happens game 2? I brick, I cannot find a second basic Pokemon after going first, and he whiffs the turn 1 KO by 1 card. He probably thinned out his deck down to less than 20 cards, and he was not able to hit a Mega Turbo. So on my turn 2, I was able to top deck a basic, and I was actually able to make a game out of game 2. I was able to come back almost, and towards the end of game 2, there came a turn where he had 1 card in hand. And he had an active Mega Rayquaza EX with 180 damage on it. There was a Faded Town in play, and he had a benched regular Rayquaza powered up, and he was down to 1 price. I was still down to 4, so I still needed 1 more turn to win. But what happened was, I had the choice, and I knew he still had at least 2 he still had 2 Verseeker and maybe 1 Lysander left, and his deck was pretty thin at that point. So I figured that if I didn't use Shadow Stitching and got the KO, I would make it so that he would require the Lysander and an energy to retreat his active Pokemon. and best case scenario, he would not replace the stadium, and his Mega Rayquaza would get KO'd coming into my turn, allowing me to attack something brand new and allowing me to win the match by using 2 giant water shurikens. But what ended up actually happening is that because I did not use Shadow Stitching and did not get the KO, his only card in hand was Shaymin EX. So with his deck so thin, he was able to get the energy, replace the stadium, play down Shaymin, get the Lysander for the game. So that was very disappointing, and I honestly believe I did not make the wrong call because of what he had shown. He had, I believe, 3 energy in the discard pile by then. I mean, maybe it was a 55-45 call, which under pressure and where you have to make a snap decision, I don't think either play would have been wrong. And in my mind, I was making the safest play, but now in retrospect, I mean, only he knew only he knows what he top decked, only he knows what he already had in his hand, and I don't know, really difficult scenario, but he ended up beating me on that game too. And yeah, that was my 3rd loss of the day. That meant I had no chance to make day 2 because I now had a 5-3 record. And for the last round of the day, I was up against Jinxang with a Volcanion EX deck. Now, I will say, this is the round where the deck decided to finally work to its full potential, and I completely dominated Jinx. It didn't help that he also bricked in game 2, but between game 1 and game 2, he didn't draw too many prizes. I just completely dominated with Shadow Stitching, with my abilities. I was able to fully set up. The deck ran brilliantly, so too bad that didn't happen consistently, but once again, I only have myself to blame. So that was the end of my regionals run. I ended up with a 6-3-0 record, ended up in 56th place out of 641, which is a mistake. It was 612 Masters players, and I ended up getting 24 championship points, which isn't a lot, but because of the very, very, very low amount of tournaments, not only in Latin America but in Mexico, I believe this 24 CP could actually be game-changing in the Latin American season, or the Latin American rankings rather. So because they don't go towards the League Cup or League Challenge finishes, and I mean that's not even gonna matter because Mexico sucks, and there's been in 3 months there's been 1 League Challenge, and in other countries like Argentina, there's been at least 20 league challenges. So we're definitely at a huge disadvantage there, and it doesn't feel like the organizers care too much about that. I don't know the reason or their reasons or whatever, but it makes absolutely no sense, and they're only hurting us Mexican players. But anyways, that 24 CP might end up mattering, and as of today, I have 80 CP because I then played on Sunday the League Challenge, and I got 5th place. There were 59 players in the League Challenge. I went 5-1, and I was 5th place. So I missed out on the 10 CP. I ended up getting 6 more, so 30 total for the weekend, plus the 50 I already had from Worlds and another League Challenge. That makes it so that I have 80 championship points. Today, that's 270 away from the invite still, but I'm gonna be at Fort Wayne Regional, so if you're gonna be there, definitely come say hi. And I will also be going to London International, so hopefully I'll be able to do a better performance or have a better performance there. I definitely want to improve upon. I find it funny that I got 53rd at Worlds and then 56th at Orlando Regionals, so kind of similar, but the field was obviously much, much larger at Orlando Regionals. And that will be all from me today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. The full list once again will be in the description down below, but let's talk about some quick changes of the deck. Here you go. The cards which lose a card are in red, the cards which gain a card are in green. They're very subtle changes, but if you heard or if you've made it all the way to this point so far, you will know or you will have noticed that out of I don't know, 8 games that I lost throughout Swiss rounds, 7 were because I got benched out. So, I mean, that's gotta tell you something, right? It's not that I don't know how to shuffle. It's not that I got so unlucky. Like, you could say you get unlucky once or twice, maybe 3 times, but 7 times, that's no coincidence. And this is what I was talking about. I sacrificed way too much early game consistency in order to try and have a good chance against every deck in the late game. But in doing so, my testing definitely didn't show this. Maybe I was getting lucky in testing, or maybe I just didn't pay enough attention to the games where I was losing early on. But I am taking out a Greninja Break and adding a second Remoraid, going back to a 2-1 Octillery line, because Octillery is really great in any non-Garbodor matchup, gives you a ton of consistency and ups the basic count. You could actually add a second Jirachi as well if you wanted instead of the Remoraid. That's definitely an option. And I am taking out one Faded Town for another Ultra Ball. Now, why Faded Town? Well, the extra damage counters from Faded Town are really good, but the crucial card in those matchups are the Bursting Balloon, not the Faded Town. So Faded Town is really strong when combined with an N, and if they find their counters, no matter if you have 4 or 3 or however many, they're gonna counter it. So the idea with Faded Town is to combine it with N or Ace Trainer in order to try and keep it there locked. But in case you can't, well, at least you don't have 4 dead copies. And it's also that if Darkrai Giratina becomes really popular, if there are other decks that end up coming out in order to counter that deck, they'll probably be fairy based, and they will probably not, like, the Faded Towns will not be useful in every matchup. So I feel like a card that is not useful in every single matchup, like Faded Town is the only card that is not useful in every single matchup that's at a count of 4. Jirachi is the only other card that is not useful in every single matchup, but every other card is useful or important one way or another in any given matchup. But having 4 Faded Town in a field of 600 players where you know you're going to play against Volcanion, where you know you're going to play against Darkrai Giratina, where you know you're going to play against Rainbow Road, having 4 dead cards immediately really puts you at a disadvantage. So I think subtracting 1 for a second Ultra Ball not only increases your early game consistency, but also increases the ways you can find a Greninja Break. And I feel like that's a really justified change. So yeah, that's gonna be it from me, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Definitely subscribe if you haven't yet. If you have any comments, anything you want to add to this, or any suggestions or whatever, feel free to comment, feel free to test out the list, and that will be all from me today. Thank you so much, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.